Jeffrey Hayzlett, who is the CEO and chairman of the C-Suite Network. I met him back around 2006 when he was the CMO of Kodak. So he's been the CMO of a Fortune 100 company. This is really just when people are getting really serious about social media. And he always seemed to be all over the place doing something cool. And this was when I was crazy passionate about that subject. And we managed to connect back then. We stayed in contact all these years. And now he's gone on to do some pretty incredible things. So I'm very honored to have him on our ship today. Beyond his great C-suite roles, he's been a board leader at many companies. And he's also started a company that's very close to my home and my passion, which is around leadership. So he's been doing a C-Suite Network for, I think, about 7 years. He's going to tell us a little bit more about what that means. But it means he's been exposed to, from my point of view, a ton of really senior people and able to share maybe what he's learned both from his own experience, but through some of the experience he's had interacting with all those people. And then on a very funny note, to me anyway, he's been on a lot of big media shows. In fact, he's had his own TV show on Bloomberg. So I'm thrilled he's made it here to O Ship and truly made it. And at some point, we may even have to ask him about his stint on Celebrity Apprentice. So with that, welcome to this week's O Ship. Jeffrey, I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to the show.
Hey, what a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much. I should say that thanks for having me aboard. We'll start with that.
I like that. You're actually the first person to use that. Now that anyone else has done that, I'm like, Jeffrey Hayzlett's already cracked that joke. So that's
good. Yeah, they should. They'll be on the dinghy from now on. I'll be at the dinghy.
Exactly. You might have to put us in the portholes, Robert. If we're going to go full nautical this early into the show. So Jeffrey, I know a lot about you, and Freddie, I even before the show took the point of going through your Wikipedia and reading your bio again and looking at your LinkedIn, just even catching up on all the cool stuff you've done. But if you could introduce yourself and a little bit about what you're focused on right now to our audience, that would be really great.
You bet. Well, thank you. And I appreciate the introduction. I got a chance to listen to it. I should go check out my Wikipedia page. I haven't looked at that for a long time. But, I bought and sold over 250 companies in my career, about 25 billion of transactions on those side. And then, of course, I was the chief marketing officer of Eastman Kodak. Led a budget of about 17 billion on marketing spend and about 187 on the total sales. And then left there, went on to become my own television host of on Bloomberg, the C-Suite with Jeffrey Hayzlett, led me to start the C-Suite Network, which now is a network of about 350,000 executives and, of course, 90 million views. We have 75 TV shows, 250 podcast shows, and growing. And we're growing it, like with a hockey stick. Usually, most people talk about growing a hockey stick. I've always been that handle. I've never been way up at the toe. And so this is kind of nice to be at that level with things. And of course, you mentioned I serve on numerous boards, 3 public companies and 11 private companies today. And most of those I've invested in at some level. Almost all of them, I have some investment or a majority investment in many of the companies. And just leading a team and having a great time doing it. I'm having the time of my life. I've never had this much fun in my life.
Well, one of the amazing things about you that people will note, probably wouldn't have noticed had I not pointed this out early in the show, you will never, ever see him raise his hands up. And that's because this entire time he's sending emails and he's multitasking because they have that much stuff on his plate. There's no way he could find time for O Ship normally. So very talented man.
Well, trust me, I've had lots and lots of O Ship moments. Trust me, my entire career is filled with O Ship moments. I can tell you numerous of them very embarrassing and so forth, but that's just the nature of business, right? I mean, that's it.
If you haven't screwed it up at least once, you weren't trying hard enough. I think it's a good way to look at it.
Well, and then, think about the companies that you try to start. And, I tried to, like once I invested in a pheasant farm, I tried to corner the market on pheasants till I realized there wasn't one, I mean, all kinds of things. It's a foul business, so to speak.
Okay. You're so good on the
boom, boom.
So I have to ask, I'm intrigued now. You've opened the door. how do you even come around to deciding, given all the other industries I know you to be in, how do you come around to deciding you want to be in the pheasant business?
I'm an avid hunter, and that was this is a number of years ago, but it had nothing to do with that. We were actually trying to do smoked pheasants, pheasant under the glass, things like that. But I got to tell you, the real problem isn't so much selling them; it's just raising them. A wild bird like that, we used to have, literally pens that were size of football fields with, and one night, there's this tremendous thunderstorm in South Dakota. South Dakota is where I'm from, and they have these big thunderstorms that roll through. We had like 3 inches of rain in like half an hour, and I had 10,000 of these pheasants, look up in the sky, open their beaks and drown. I mean, there's the stupidest freaking birds in the face of the earth. And
you can't be serious. Seriously?
No, I'm serious as I can. Hey, listen, you laugh about it, okay? You know what it's like to have a little funeral for all those birds? You know what it's like to have now?
I'm mortified. First of all, I'm obsessed with animals, and everyone teases me because I've got a whole flock of birds that I feed in my backyard. But I guess Florida birds are a bit brighter than South Dakota birds.
Yeah, well, it's our state bird. We hunt. South Dakota, I think, is the only state that they hunt their state bird. They actually, everybody else, West Virginia cardinal, it's regal, it's beautiful, it's pretty. In South Dakota, we hunt them down and shoot them. Okay,
it could be a mercy killing. You're only hunting them so that they don't drown themselves in a random rainstorm.
Exactly. Yeah, suicide in front of my shotgun would be great. That's what I would like. Yeah, exactly.
That's crazy.
But life is filled with those kind of moments. I mean, that's the experience of being in business. You should be going and going, and if you're not making, people usually in these interviews they'll ask me, "What's my biggest mistake?" I said, "I don't know. I haven't made it yet." And what I mean by that is there's always going to be a bigger one. And if you're doing the things you need to be doing, this is how you learn. This is how you do it.
I have to connect this back. That I love that you did that statement you said, and it reminds me of my favorite thing my father's ever told me. And I remember sharing the story way back in kind of season 1 of Oh Shit, but I'm going to share it again because I think it's so appropriate. And so, again, my father, pretty decent entrepreneur in his own right, obviously his own enormous amount of admiration for him. And he and I were best friends. And we only used to like to talk about 2 things. And not everyone understood our relationship, but this was our thing. We would talk about business, and we'd like to talk about girls. And that's what we talked about. That was our thing. And we talked every single day. And I was always really open with my dad, and I would tell him mistakes I'd made. And so I remember coming to him one day, by the way, worth noting, I think he was 55 when he had me, so there's a huge age gap between us. And I remember telling him this story one time of something I'd screwed up. I was probably about 25-year-old entrepreneur at the time. I think this particular time it was about a woman instead of about business. And he listens, he nods, doesn't interrupt me. And then finally, I get to the end of my story, he just puts his hand on my shoulder and goes, "Son, I fucked up things you haven't even thought of yet." And I think it's just very much the spirit of what you just said. I love that. I think it's the first time I ever had someone else say something that really hit the same thing I think he was trying to really, really connect with me on. That's cool. Yeah. I love that.
That's good advice. That's good advice about women and good advice about business. Either way, it's true. I know me, and I wouldn't be married to me, so I totally get statements like that.
So I'm intrigued. There's so many different things we can talk about. I want to start by talking a little bit around the C-suite network, and then I'd love to kind of maybe jump around to some of the folks that you're seeing, the things you're seeing with some of the leaders in the group. So, you've got you said the podcasts and the media side of the business is obviously big. Another part of it seems like it's about networking and connecting people with their peers. What have you seen with that with COVID? Obviously, it's been kind of a weird year for everybody. Obviously, or last year was certainly a weird year, and it doesn't look like it's getting any less weird, sadly, right now. Do you, as the networking aspect for the business?
A lot of the meetings, things like that, we used to do, face to face. Obviously, that went away, and so what you do find is that people have a need to find, a trusted environment that they can get together, and that's one of the cool things I knew about the C-suite. When I was working at Kodak, I would seek out the counsel of other CMOs that were of similar size or in the same kinds of industry, because you're a $1 billion company, you want to kind of hang around other $1 billion companies. And so I just knew there was a value in us finding places where CEOs could stay together, CMOs, CFOs, CIOs, whatever it is. So we picked the genre of saying, why would we just be a CEO network, or why would we just be a CMO network? Let's be a C-suite network for everybody. And then, really truly what everyone needs, regardless of what your status is in life, you need a little motivation, some inspiration, some education. Yeah. And then if you combine that with a chance for monetization, through engagement, well, then you've got the trifecta. And then at the same time, let's overlay COVID on top of that, which, as you know, I started seeing this stuff before COVID a long time ago about the changing nature of the digital, incursion into our businesses, and the fact that you had to jump on this bandwagon. Well, what happened with COVID accelerated this curve in a great way. And so days became weeks, weeks became months, months became years, and that's what we're seeing. So there's a massive shift for you to be able to shift your business. And what we did as C-Suite Network was say, look, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, I can't even sew a frickin' mask, right? But what I can be is a business first responder. And that's what leaders in business are. Our job in the C-suite isn't to be the smartest person in the room. God knows that's not going to be the case. I've said in a lot of those boardrooms. But our job is to be the most strategic person. And so what we try to do is bring people together to give them the tools to do that. And for us, we're up over last year, certainly in meetings, in listenership, viewership, all those things. But our revenue is up because people sought this out. They wanted to know, how do I communicate in this square? How do I communicate and lead my teams? What are other people doing? How are they doing it? What are the best practices? Oh my gosh, what's the trend going to be for my office? I'm spending $80 million a year on office space. Now, what's that mean? How do I know my employees are doing the work at home? All of these things pop up. And what you do is by coming together, by sharing, you learn, and then you can start to cheer. And quite frankly, many times you can just start to care for each other. And that's what that is. So we help people really to step into an environment where they can take the armor off at the door. And that's really the strength of the group.
Yeah, I mean, I think, right now, and again, can't help but acknowledge how challenging the last whatever number of months, almost over a year. I don't know, it's all blur at this point, frankly. Obviously people are dealing with a lot of stuff personally, and they're having to figure out ways to reinvent the way they work, and they're figuring out ways to live and work at home and with their kids and everything else. But there is a whole other set of challenges that not everyone realizes because they may not be exposed to. And it's very hard for employees. But for a lot of employers and leaders, they really want to do right by their companies. They're worried about, can they adjust to survive? Can they adjust to make their workforces work? And some of them are freaking out. And frankly, when you're a leader, you don't expose your team and your staff to that kind of stuff, because you have to be able to project confidence and to help them feel confident. And so I feel like being able to have a peer group where you can really kind of let your guard down and hear what other people's challenges are is probably more valuable than it's ever been, right now. So
especially if you layer over now on top of it, let's layer. Okay, we got COVID, which is its own issue. Layer that with the worst economic conditions we've ever faced. Layer that with the most blatant racism that we've ever come to see, right? Because it's finally exposed. It's been there forever, okay? But now we know it. Now all white people know, holy crap, this is what's been going on because of cameras and everything else. So there's been all that. So now you're a leader in this. And then let's put personal things on top of that. I mean, there are a lot of leaders who have real problems, oh shit moments of depression and thoughts of suicide, and all kinds of things come to the forefront. And so you need a place, you need that kind of network. And then, oh my gosh, I need to do my own podcast, or I now need to be the brand. I've lost TV. I don't have this. We don't have our conventions anymore. We don't have the trade shows. Now I've got to be a podcaster. Now I got to be a TV show host. Now I've got to be a blogger. I've got to do all of these things that are real important. So we help people with that by showing them how to use content to get from here, way up to here. And so that's a big part of it as well. So that's, so we combine this giant sequoia tree, which is what we kind of describe as the network. And underneath that, you've got a community, you've got content, you've got meetings and convening, and then you've also got a concierge of services, because you need to have those. Because, way it is, we learn from each other. It's like, way back when you were talking about when we met in social media, I was the first person to ever name a chief blogger. I'm the one that came up with that term. Oh, yeah. And then, and I remember when I put it out there, and the second company to do it was Dell Computers. Kodak was the first. And I named Jennifer Sisley as the very first chief blogger ever in any company, and gave her that title. And of course, I got crap from the media saying it was a show. I said, no, it's not. It's a legitimate term. And then later I named the chief listing officer. I named somebody a chief listing officer, because you needed somebody who heard from here to here to here to here and could bring all this digital conversation together under one roof. And those are some key things that you just got to sit back every once in a while and take a look at, and then figure out how you're going to use those tools.
The sad is, I don't think people still haven't quite figured it out even today. But one last subject, I think, on C-Suite Network, and then I want to talk a little bit more about leadership. So I was on the site earlier, I was looking, you've got all these kind of great events. One caught my eye, which I thought was quite interesting, especially because it was at 9 p.m. on a Sunday, and it was a Scotch hour. So is that a lot of people showing up on Sunday? I'm a Scotch drinker.
It's one of our biggest groups. We've got over 800 people registered for that particular event. Now typically not that many show up, thank goodness, because I don't know what I'd do if I had 800.
I was going to say, it's a busy chat room.
But we have, you need social time. You need, we do a wine tasting about every 2 weeks. And then this Scotch Sunday, I just started doing it because I like drinking Scotch, and it was Sunday. What the heck? We don't have anything programmed, so let's get together and have conversations. And we tackle some really tough stuff. I mean, sometimes it's about what's your favorite songs, those kind of things. But a lot of it's usually politics and really tough subjects. And we do it just like we would do it at a pub, like we would be sitting together, and that's the way we treat it. And we have conversations. Sometimes I got to cut people off, or let's get you some moderate. Yeah, because it gets heated just like it would, and that's okay. We love that, because if you don't have some conflict, if you don't have some friction, then you're not pushing the conversation enough, and you won't move it enough. And good, healthy debates is a wonderful thing to have in the C-suite or anywhere in your family or whatever, to have those kind of conversations. So we do a Sunday Scotch night, and it starts at 9 Eastern, so that we can also have 6 p.m. on the West Coast. And they usually run for an hour to sometimes as much as 3 hours. This event, it's never been less than an hour and a half, I don't think. But it's just a great thing. You can bring any brown liquor you want, You can even bring tequila. And if, by the way, if you don't drink, we welcome you, because we won't judge you unless you bring a rosé. If you bring a rosé, we will make fun of you. I'm
asking for it at that point.
Exactly. It's like a target, right on. It's a target, and we need to make fun of you. And someone actually did show it with a rosé, and he's never been back. He's never been back.
The only time you get a semi-free pass on that is at the Cannes Lions. Other than that, it's all a big.
Yeah, maybe. Or like. Out at what is it? The fancy schmancy place out in New York and out Hamptons. Yeah. Jose. Hamptons. The fancy schmancy place. I'm never invited to that. Cannes I used to go to because of Kodak and the film festival and all that. But yeah, the fancy schmancy place I'm never invited for obvious reasons.
Yeah, it's better off that way. So I want to shift gears for a second. You've been on a bunch of boards. You're obviously in contact with literally tens of thousands of C-suite executives over the last 7+ years of you doing C-Suite Network. There's so many different ways we could take this. Is there any themes or areas around leadership that you're particularly passionate about right now? They're just something that kind of triggers you or lights your fire that you could share with our audience? You think it's an interesting subject?
Yeah, I think the biggest one I would say, and it's really truly around one of our groups called the Hero Club, but with that it permeates everything. In fact, I actually wrote a book called The Hero Factor, talking about how great leaders put people above profits. And so I am on a mission around that. And I really truly believe that the best thing that leaders can do is talk about values. What are the values of the company? What are the values of what you want to represent? What does that look like? And can everybody in the company, tell you what those conditions of satisfaction are? And most conflicts, most things that you see inside of companies can be solved with great values. If you have great values as a company, if you're a value-driven company, you typically have employees who are more engaged. 53% of employees aren't engaged in their business. Couldn't even tell you what the value statements are. And as a result, those businesses that are value-based, that put people above profits primarily, also focused on the, doing the right thing in the environment, right thing for a little league, the right thing for everything around your community, then you find that those businesses gross more money than anybody else. They net more money than anyone else in their industry. They have more engaged employees, they have happier customers, and they have vendors who want to do business with them. And when they walk through the community, everybody points at them and says, there goes a hero. Not necessarily as a hero, but there goes a great business leader. And that's the thing I'm most passionate about, because if we can get to that, we can get to a lot. And I don't think everybody wakes up and says, I can't wait to be stupid, or I can't wait to be valueless. Now, there are some companies that are like that. There are asshat companies. Let's be clear. That, I wanted to call them worse than that, but that's the only word I could get to get through the censors was asshat. Okay? But that's where I would say is a great deal of conflict that comes around, and most leaders I see really, they don't know that, but they want to talk about values. They want to focus on values, and they're looking for a way to be able to do that. They mostly talk about it in terms of culture, but if you get really down to it, it's about the values.
What do you think happens when you see leaders basically that believe in putting people over profits, or are focused on values, and maybe they're in larger organizations? Again, you've been in Fortune 100, Fortune 1000 organizations. What happens when those people are inside a bigger organization and they're not, and the bigger organization isn't aligned? Do they change the organization, or do they leave the organization? Or I guess it depends on the person.
It does depend on the person and what they're trying to get done. I mean, when you see a leader who trims 8,500 employees and then takes $11 million bonus, that's not a real leader, in my opinion. That's just another asshat. That's someone who doesn't put people above profits. I mean, you just laid off 8,500 people to do the right thing. Let's be clear. Sometimes you have to do that. I've been in those situations, but I wouldn't take a check to celebrate that, or to say, hey, I did a good job. I would feel opposite of that. I would say, we need to put that 11 million. I could have saved that many more jobs. I could have saved that much more for the company. Yeah, while I might have, have benefited from it, I still wouldn't do that. There's no way in any shape, form, there's no frickin' way, right? And I, the key is to be able to find great leaders like that, and to be able to have people have the backbone to be able to say, no, this is what we're going to do and the way we're going to do it. And and right now people are really struggling. I mean, look at most businesses are down. They're not doing as well as they could. There are some businesses, while growth might have been good, profits were down. That was the way it was for us this year. Not only just profits, there were no profits. Never have I worked so hard for so little, but I didn't lay anybody off, kept everybody employed, grew the company, served more people than I've ever served in the history of our company combined in 1 year. So those are the things that you do. And somebody said, Jeff, why do you do that? Because you're supposed to do the right thing, right? And I think most leaders who get up every day, no one says, I can't wait to be stupid. They want to do the right things, right? And so I think most of them are focused, and they just always don't know what that is, right? Or how to get there. And that, again, I'm not the commercial for the C-Suite Network, but that's the reason why we exist, is a way for people to come together, to share, to learn, to cheer. And even, as I said, care. I mean, that's really what it's around. We describe it as kind of like the 3 R's. You have to have relevancy, for each other. And then from the relevancy, we also have a couple of other things in terms of reach and then reciprocity. And that's the way it should work. I call it the 3 R's. You got to have relevancy, then you add it with reach, and then you get the reciprocity.
Let me go back again to this subject of these leaders, these hero leaders. What I'm intrigued by is how does someone even get to that place? Is it taught? Is it inherent in them? Is it generational? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
When
well, a
these
lot of it
trends.
starts at home. Yeah.
Yeah.
But a lot of it starts at home. You mentioned your father. You mentioned the way that is. You're socialized through that process. There's a right and there's a wrong. Not all of us are taught that. Not all of us are taught good management skills, good management practices, right? So you have to learn that, but you also have to have an innate sense of, okay, I don't know everything, right? And that's what I think great leaders, like for instance, somebody else said, Larry King, when he passed here recently, there was a comment. He goes, I know when I'm talking, I can't listen and I can't learn.
Mm.
And I see a lot of great leaders who are really great listeners, and by doing that, they can, like I go into it with a sense of, I don't know what I don't know. And I think great leaders come at it with a sense of, oh, I'm not aware of what I'm not aware of. And so they're always trying to learn. They're always trying to feel. They're always trying to get the real story, because it's always stories. It's always stories.
You didn't know this when you started telling the story, and I want to be clear. I certainly don't consider myself a hero, but Chameleon Collective as a company absolutely prioritizes people over profits, to the point that we actually distribute all of our profits down into the company, almost like how an employee-owned company would work. I would argue that our people are really engaged, bordering on cult-like, in terms of how much a lot of them love the business. And we almost grew 50%, in last year, which was a pretty crazy year. And that's why I think I'm so intrigued by this, because I'm really passionate about this way of working. I think it's the future of work. I think that it gets people to a sense of loyalty and to a sense of focus, a sense of energy around the company that I've never seen before. And it's not just about the money, by the way. It's the sentiment that when people see that you're behind them and you care about them and you're not putting anyone else above them, and everyone is in it together, but for real, not just because the leader tells you, it is. It just generates this kind of experience and culture like I've never really seen before. But I have to be honest in saying, I'm not really sure how you recreate that. Is it, and maybe it's just, there's a certain types of culturally aligned people out there, and they just need to find each other. Maybe that's why it's happening now, because of, digital and the internet, and people not having to go in the office quite like they used to. Maybe people are finding each other, and groups are aligning and coalescing in that way. It's just not totally clear to me. That's why I find the subject so interesting and so fascinating.
Well, we're seeing more and more of it. I talked to a CEO today whose company's based in DC. He's out living in Utah right now because of COVID, hanging out like I am in South Dakota, where in South Dakota, we've been practicing physical distancing since 1889. So, there you go. So not a problem. But I think people like minds find each other. I think when there's a need, you'll find it. And now they're learning. But you also got to take the age range of most of the leaders have been leading businesses. They've been a little bit older, not attuned with the kinds of things that we see today, the digital technology that's available to them. They used to have when they Googled something, they'd turn to somebody and ask them to Google it. I used to joke, my wife, you said, was my daughter was her personal Googler until she, I said, you can actually do this yourself. So, not everybody.
I literally self-declare. I went to Google University. That's literally like damn near everything I know started with an internet search. So it's,
and I grew up. I'm a millennial in a baby boomer body. That's kind of the way I do. So that's just how I do it. But you can learn that.
You're one-upping me. I feel like I'm a millennial in a Gen Xer body. You're always one bit better than me, Jeffrey. That just drives me nuts.
Hey, I like to do things big. And I walk. When somebody described me, they asked some professional speaker, who would you be like? And she said, I would love to have the eloquence of Les Brown and the swagger of Jeffrey Hayzlett. And I thought, wow, that's pretty good. I love that. That was pretty good.
That's hilarious. So speaking of swagger, I'm intrigued, and I have to ask, what was it like being on? I'm sure many people ask you, but I'm intrigued. What was it like being on Celebrity Apprentice? And I'm guessing the Trump of them is probably quite different or maybe not of Trump of now. But I'd love to know what that experience was like.
I was a judge for 3 seasons on that show, and got to know him. He's been a friend of mine for a while. Let's be clear, I think he's batshit crazy, but nonetheless, in terms of some of his policies, practices, and so forth, it's surprising to see the outcome of that. Now, on the show, to give you an idea of the show, totally professional, unbelievable. Yeah. I've never seen a guy who could hit his lines like that, because it's a tough thing. I mean, I was live on TV and debating Gene Simmons on the finale. It's not an easy thing. I had to run to the bathroom like 15 times before I went on the show, because I was afraid I was going to wet my pants. I was so nervous. And I do live TV, so it kind of give you an idea. But when you have 16, 18 million people watching you on a finale, it's amazing. But what you see is what you get. What you see is what you get. I mean, and the person I was most impressed with, obviously I got to meet all the kids, his wife, everybody over the years. Ivanka was always just top notch. I mean, class act. And I'm sad to see some of this, the vile nature of politics and what's happened to them on some of that stuff. But you sign up for that. You sign up for that. It's not like someone forced them to do it. So.
I'd tell you a good segue from that, I think, is you talk about wanting great leaders in politics, but who the hell would want to be in politics right now? I mean, so how does that ever attract our best people? I think, and you and I have been very lucky to be exposed to some really wonderful leaders, and I can't think of a single incredible leader I know that would be like, oh, I'd love to throw myself in politics so I can get eviscerated by everybody for everything every day.
But you need to change that. I mean, look, you mentioned I'm a number of corporate boards. I was in a board where somebody did something really bad, and 3 of the 5 board members, we resigned, and we said, this is really bad. What you're doing is not right, and we resigned. And as a result, we still got sued. Even though we did the right thing, made the front page of the Wall Street Journal, the whole bit, we did the right thing. In the end, what we did and how we were trying to prevent someone from taking over the company was the right thing. But the shareholders still sued us. Some of the shareholders still sued us. And my wife says, we're not getting paid. We weren't getting paid for like 2 or 3 years on this board. We were getting sued, and we were still in there, hanging in there, trying to do the things you should do. And I remember her turned to me and she said, why are you doing this? And I just turned to her and I said, it's what good people do. Yeah. And not to say that I'm a good person, but it's just the right thing to do.
You got to do things right. Yeah, no question.
Well, that's what we should. But for politicians, we should have the same thing, and we should want that, and we should want to have, the Mr. Smith goes to Washington. We need that in this country, and I think people should aspire. That should be the greatest honor. It should be a career.
Totally agree.
I believe in term limits. I always have. Ran term limits 1996 nationwide. I put it on 28 ballots across the country. We passed it. I got more votes than Ross Perot.
Awesome. I did not know that. Another fun fact. So Jeffrey, I just looking at the time, and I can't believe how much fun I was having, because I didn't even realize. I said, yeah, we'll talk for about half an hour or so. It's been almost 45 minutes. And I was sneaking suspicion we could have talked for another 2 hours and not known it. God forbid we had some scotch in our hands. It may have gone an extra hour on top of that.
We'd sound a lot more. We'd sound a lot better, though. A lot more intelligent.
Yeah, exactly. I'm always smarter, apparently. But we should do this again sometime. That was really one of my favorite shows we've done. It was really just great. I'm sure everyone in the audience enjoyed it. Lots of great insights. Definitely should connect again. And for those of you watching right now, or whether you're watching after the show on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, or any of our channels. This is something we do for fun. It's something we do because we want to share great content and insightful ideas with leaders and people seeking inspiration out there. The best thing you can do to support us is give us a like, share the video, tell your friends, and hopefully we'll see you tune in next week. Jeffrey, thanks again for showing up, and hope to see you next week on Oh Ship.
My pleasure.